This is webinar number 35, Basic Shoves Review, just going back to basics. Just reviewing foundation play. So right here, when it folds around you on the button, this is $2 180 man, about 12, 13, 14 people left, somewhere in there. Sanders sees a good opportunity. What else do you guys see in this spot? About 12, 13, or 14, somewhere around there. Low risk. Next two people have big stacks, so harder to steal from them. That's true. Let's put this here. If we were just playing a very simple style, I don't even think that's something that most people would notice. I think it's really, really important to kind of peer into the future. You know, like think about your everyday life. At some point, I'm pretty sure you're thinking, what am I going to do tomorrow? You know, most people think like that. So why not think about tomorrow while you're playing poker? That's important too. And thinking about future hands. But if we're just doing like a basic shove, even just looking at the effective size is all we really need here. I think what's really important about this hand to know is that just because the effective stack size is X doesn't mean you have to shove an X big blind range. So the effective stack size, if we average these guys, it's around, I don't know, 5,000, somewhere in there. So that's about 4 big blinds. You could even do true big blinds if you want. It comes out to like 3. You don't have to shove as if you have 4 big blinds here just because you have an effective stack size of 4 big blinds. You always want to consider your stack too. So the last thing I want to put in the review of this hand is just pay attention to your health. The better you are, the less likely you can be, or the less likely, you can be to take a spot. What's the worst hand that you guys would shove here? Just type one of the worst ones you guys would all shove here. King 9. 2, 3. Wow. Oops. 8, 4 suited. Why the big discrepancy? Some people say King 9, some people say 10, 8, some people say 2, 3. I don't think there should be an exact range here. I think if, in terms of going back to basics, if we were just to do something normal, somewhere around half of your hands should be a good kind of base default range here. We do have imperfect information. You're right. You're right. So something about basic, going back to basic shoves, is just kind of having a default range that's good on average. Of course, we can always do better than that. But we want to make sure that the basics are solid. Let's see what happened. Oh, no way. Look what happened in the small blind in the last hand. Look. He was dead, and then he just survived with deuce 3 offsuit. And then here he is now. So, yeah, good question. Like, we can have like a baseline range, like somewhere around half of our hands, like, you know, Queen 8, King 5 suited, 8, 7 suited, stuff like that. But just use it as a guideline. It doesn't mean that that's what our range should be, but that should be a pivot point for our range. And you can pivot around that baseline range. So sometimes if you feel the guys are really loose, you can pivot to 30% of your hands. If you think they're really tight, you can pivot to 100% of your hands. But we want to make sure that we have a strong foundation baseline range. kind of actually like how you said that. Well, these spots are specific, but I think in every spot you can have a baseline range for shoving at least. Just something that where you just know, okay, this is a good range. But it doesn't mean that you should always choose that range, but you can work around that point. Because honestly here, your range should probably be always at least 30% of your hands, like any ace for sure, right? And all those strong ones like Jack 10 suited. But it can go anywhere from like 30% to 100%. But I think it is still good to have like a marker, like the baseline range, like Puyon said, where it's just, okay, 50, somewhere around 50, 55, 60%, okay, that's my spot. And then you pivot around that range. So if you have Queen 5 offsuit here, you can determine if this is a good spot for Queen 5 or not, whether it's based upon stats, your feel at the moment, maybe what happened at the small blind in the last hand if you noticed that in game. But overall, there's no perfect answer here, but it is worth having a baseline range for your spots because what that does is it solidifies your foundations. I know I've said it before on webinars, but I love the metaphor of concrete in poker. About like Mike, I don't think you've heard this before. Like I love thinking about how with foundations we have to dry the concrete before we build on top of that, because if you try and build on wet concrete, you sink and you get stuck. So I think that's something that's really important here. So this baseline range is essentially the dry concrete to make sure that we can build on top of that and expand our range from there. Does that make sense? Cool. Good to hear, Mike. I don't know what that means, my but it's not good to shove white here there as our stack is really low. Well, yeah, it depends on like how. Sure. Oh, may I? Oh, I see. There's a space. Duh. I wonder about that. So I already wrote up here like it's the better, like the more healthy you are, the less likely you can be to take a spot. But you could also interpret that the opposite too, and think like. Because Pedro, he likes using the philosophy that the healthier he is, the more likely he can be to do something, because then he's not damaged as much if he loses. And you could think that the shorter you are, I mean, it would make sense if Pedro is probably more likely to do it when he has a bunch of chips. Maybe if there's less chips, then he's less likely to do it. So that kind of makes sense. You could think about that, like, because if you do lose, you lose a bigger percentage of your stack. But I think it's kind of it's open for interpretation. I think you want to find like what suits you personally as a player, because there's no perfect response in any given spot. It's like we want to have that baseline range, but then have the ability to pivot around that based on all these circumstances, based on your playing style, based on your personal preferences. I think the biggest mistake that a player can make here is to feel required to make a play because someone else said they had to, or because a program says it's plus EV and they have to follow that rule. You want to have the baseline range, but you want to have the ability to think for yourself in any given spot. And that's true, and Pedro has a good point. In this particular game, 9 to 18 pays the same. If this was a 45-man, there's probably more reason to be aggressive because there's a payout jump here. Let me read the rest of this. Yeah, if here, actually, if you lost to 7,000, your stack would change a lot. If you had 30,000, it wouldn't change a lot. But that's what's cool about this, like, just develop your own style. But if we broke everything down to basics, it's just have a solid baseline range in the spot of somewhere around 40, 50, 60% of hands, like in there somewhere. It doesn't mean that you absolutely have to shove those hands. It's just like a really strong recommendation, I guess, because we want to make sure that our basics are intact, because we want to build on sturdy concrete, not wet concrete, if that still makes sense. Okay. Any last questions about that before moving on? Yeah, agree. Agree. Alright, see what happened. Hero shoves, gets called by ace-king, and loses. Alright, so next hand, another pretty basic spot. In terms of true big blinds, Hero has 5 true big blinds, because 800, 1600. So what, in your guys' opinion, is a decent 5 true big blind range from the cutoff? So around 70-80%, those both sound good as good baseline starting points. Dottie says ATC, that's fine because you're pivoting around that starting point of 70 or 80%. Sander says anything nice. We get another 80. Puyan says he'd be worried about the short stack. Puyan, but here he showed you he just folded, so there's less to worry about. And also 3-2-1 theory suggests that as long as a person has at least 1200 here, they will fold with some type of consistency. Yeah, Puyan, good question. He went in, but look how short he was right here. Yeah. So actually, Puyan, if you didn't see that he was that short, and then you remember it was 2-3 offsuit, and like let's pretend he did call off, then I think then you have a reason to maybe fold, maybe not a6, but to fold other hands if you felt he really was going to call off. So good point. So Pedro says 9-10 plus. That's good too. What I want to make sure here is that this is not your equation. In other words, like in our head, Marcus Vick, who is a member of the site, he told me he would think about how to get a range as an equation of all the different things he sees around him. So the most basic thing that the majority of players are doing is they're saying, okay, I have 5 big blinds, I'm in the cutoff, and because of that, I have a range. And this is not the equation we want. We want to add some variables to that in order to make this a better equation. So for instance, Morton, where'd you write that, Morton? Said depends on big blind. So Morton he's putting like, who is big blind, he's putting that in his little mental equation of what range it is. But I think the most important thing right here is stage of game. We always have to add stage of game for new guys, stage of game. We always want to add stage of game into our thinking here because that tells us a lot. From experience, we know that when there's 12, 13, or 14 people left in a 180 man, if you have 8,000, that is not a good stack size, right? If this was for some reason a 45-man final table, 8,000 becomes a better stack size for that game. So that changes our interpretation of what 5 true big blinds in the cutoff actually means. This is kind of a good point. Now, it kind of depends on who the big blind is. Maybe not for ace-6 suited, but for other hands where you're likely to be beat a lot if you shove. Like if you had 8-7 offsuit here. Mike was saying earlier, and Jerome, they were saying, hey, I'm going to shove somewhere around 70-80%, right? So the bottom portion of those hands, like 8-7 offsuit or 5-4 suited, it could make a difference if the big blind is crazy loose or something. I don't think it makes too much of a difference with ace-6 suited because you're pretty much going to shove it anyway, no matter who anybody is. So it just makes a difference for like the weaker portion of your hands. All I want to make sure in the review of this basic shoving hand is that you're not just simplifying everything down to I have a certain number of big blinds in a certain position and that's that. At very minimum, I would like you guys to include what type of game are you in because it implies a lot about what good stack sizes are. And what's cool is there's no program that can tell you what good stack sizes are, what medium stack sizes are, and what bad stack sizes are for whatever stage of game you're in. That's all your experience. I mean, you think about it, everybody at this webinar, we've combined played how many games? At least 250,000 games combined, probably. What do you think? At least 150, 200,000 minimum? Something crazy like that. But all of us from experience, we're able to look at a certain stack size at any point in a game and just say like, oh, I have a good stack size. Right. You know, and it comes from experience. So you also have to recognize the points where you don't have a good stack size for the game that you're in.
Sorry, what?
And take advantage of it. So I think in this hand, assuming no information,
you get your
a very wide range, somewhere around 70-80%. And then pivot around that to suit your needs. Any questions about that at all? Anybody?
Yeah, you did take a while to get back, didn't you? You took a while to get back, didn't you?
All right. So now you see this. I've written this a couple times. I know I've talked to several of you, probably the majority of you, about this in coaching sessions. So let's look at this hand. And this is what links all of these hands together. Okay. You know, we have a standard shove with 9-8 of hearts. I'm sure every single person here shoves it, which is good.
Monday.
Whenever you're shoving a hand, it's worth some type of theoretical value or expected value. Most of you know by now that your expected value is comprised of two things. And it's your folding equity and your showdown equity.
Negotiate that shit.
Really, really important. What does that mean? Can anybody explain what that means? Yeah.
I'm just recording this thing. If he might come around later, might cook, but I don't know if he's gonna cook. But I don't know yet. If he's at training, innit? What are you doing? Yeah, maybe.
Okay. So I like this. It means you're folding equity if they fold, whatever percentage of time, and the showdown equity you have when they do call.
Made a decision yet?
Showdown equity a lot of the time tends to be negative, especially if you have a bad hand, because usually like you're probably beat. But the folding equity usually pulls you up past the 0 mark. For example, a lot of shoving hands will look like if you get called, you lose 2 points. If they all fold, you win 4 points. So overall, you win 2 points. Therefore, you win points by shoving. But this is really important to understand because this is the foundation of every single shove you ever make. It's a combination of folding equity and showdown equity. And a lot of people don't really consider this when they're making a shove. Here, your net EV in this hand is a combination of the total percentage that they fold. Let's say they all fold 50% in this hand combined. Your folding equity is half of that pot because you pick up 1650 when they fold. Right? So you're entitled to half of that. So that would be like saying in this 9-8 of hearts hand, your EV is 1650 plus whatever your showdown equity is. Now, of course, folding equity is a lot easier to estimate than showdown equity, because showdown equity requires all this stupid math that just makes our brains hurt. Folding equity, you can always estimate. You can know if they all fold half the time, I win half the pot. What's really cool about this is what that means is you can lose up to 1,650 chips and still break even on this hand. So I like, when I have bad hands, I like thinking about that. Let's pretend I had like, I don't know, 7-6 offsuit right here, and I was unsure if I should shove or not. Well, what I would be thinking about is I can lose 1,600 chips. That's a whole freaking big blind. And I'll still at least break even on this hand. Because I'm putting a positive spin on this hand. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that? Anybody? Have a beer. I think it's really, really important to consider this while you're playing. And just remember, folding equity and showdown equity is your expected value. Majority of players are just kind of going through the motions of making shoves and expecting everything to work out, and without really understanding the basics that kind of that make up expected value. It's just really important to understand where things come from. You know, it's like tracing your family roots back on your family tree or something. Like, just know where you came from. It's cool to know sometimes. Worst hand you guys would shove here. Dottie, what's the worst hand you would shove here? You can't see? Oh, I see. Someone tell me what the worst hand that you shove here. Come on. Someone besides Sander, contribute. Let's go. King 6 suited. Very wide. Name a hand, Morton. Share with everybody. Cool. Thank you, sir. Jerome, what's the worst hand that you would shove here? Cool. Very good. Thanks. Okay. Contribution goes a long way. All right. Okay, next one right here. How many people shove this? Ooh, go Morton. Really? Someone folds. Wow. I would assume everybody would shove this. I was just doing a social nicety. Oh, yes, because you've shoved every hand in the context. You go shove, 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 and game flow fold. Well, because of this game flow fold, you do get smacked by the blind the next hand, and it hurts more. I can't hide the bar. But you're right. Puyon can hide the bar in the video. You are effectively five-handed. That guy is there. You're like, yeah. Shove it into 5 people. Okay. So, yeah, and I didn't even consider that, actually. I should add that. Does it matter you shoved 3 in a row prior to this? I mean, you think about it, what's the way that people would exploit you here is if they were thinking, oh my god, it's like the worst possible thing that would happen is if they called you with king queen because they thought you shoved 4 hands in a row. Because if they called you with ace 10, they were probably going to call you anyway. If they called you with ace 2, it's not the end of the world, although I would prefer that they fold. If they called you with pocket 2s, it would suck, but it's not the end of the world. The only end of the world hand here is king queen. I mean, if they snap king 6 suited, hello, like, great. Okay. Oh, that's true. Well, Morton, good point about ace king. Like, ace king's going to call no matter what, so we don't even have to consider it, really. Like, I should have been more specific, but I meant king queen because they may fold it, but then someone might change their mind at the last minute or something like that. But you're right, ace king too. Oops. And I totally just said you already typed it. I'm stupid. Okay. It seems pretty normal to shove here. I think if you fold, it's I would say it's an error. It's not a huge error, but I would say it's above average error. I think there are definitely times to adjust to you being active in every pot. I don't think that this is one of them, but I do like how in the midst of every single person here saying they disagree with you, that you still stand your ground. I like that a lot, because that shows that you're confident in your play. No A+. Okay. But again, your EV here is based off of folding equity and showdown equity. Now, one thing that EV doesn't detect here, because now we have to add something to our equation, all other future hands. Because whenever we calculate EV of something, it's just those two. Maybe what I should say is this. Your overall expected value, so an O for overall, is your folding equity plus showdown equity in this hand and all other future hands. An overall expected value, much more important than a little measly one tiny hand. Update Morton, still 9 people? Okay. So he shoves that. Now we're going to get to the last hand here. Mini webinars. Okay. Oh, not this one. Sorry. Let's see what actually happened, though, so we can follow the game flow. It's like 3 hands from now that we're going to look at. Okay, so he shoves, they fold. Here the guy shoves. Hero folds. Button shoves. Hero makes super easy shove. Guy folds with 900 left. Hero wins. Congratulations. And now we get to here. So last hand. Ooh, 1 of 7. So what to do? What to do here? Sanders says fold. I want to hear everybody else. Huyan says raise fold. Mike says ship. Matt says jam. Jerome says min raise fold or limp. Mike said Shiho, actually, not ship. Shiho. Just like a drunken ship. Camille says raise fold. And I assume when you guys say raise, you mean just like a min raise to 3,200. So for the guys who say jam, why jam? Like what's running through your heads when you want to jam here? So Sanders says there is so little fold equity that I don't think the spot is worth it, and showdown equity is never big since you have such a low kicker. Okay. Matt says we get Oh, someone's mic is on.
Wir haben letztes Mal mit Bier und Eingrund von 18 Euro.
I don't know what anyone's saying. 1 of 6? So Matt says we get an extra 800 chips and Big Blind can rejam worse. True.
Wirklich? Oh,
Alex! Komm!
Ja, dann los geht's.
Der ist schon hier! Ist auch schon hier.
So Mike said he's never folding. 2x and fold sucks with such a strong hand. Jam seems to be the best play for 7 big blinds. Okay, so he's looking at that stack, and he's doing the true big blind, so 1k, 2k, and 14 divided by 2 is 7. Okay. Who else said jam? Someone else said jam too, right? Matt said jam, but he already answered that though. Sorry, I forgot. Matt said extra 800 chips. Where are these 800 chips coming from? Oh my god, go Morton. You're winning this final table like crazy. Knock on wood. So what are those extra 800 chips? But I don't get, how are those extra? What do you mean by that? I see what you mean. No, I think though he's right. I didn't think about that. I think he would get 820 chips instantly here, I believe. Or maybe 30. It is 790 chips extra. But why can't you just raise one of the, like why can't we just go back to Sanders' spot where he wanted to fold shove and pick up 3,300 a certain percentage of the time, and then maybe you make your 800 chips here? Like, why are we so concerned about 800 chips for free if you already have 27,000? Because in terms of like your stack, I mean, that's a 2.9% increase to your stack. Oh, you're right. We get a percentage of 800. You're right. Oh, I didn't think. Yeah. Stack size, Morton? Yeah, I think like for you, for example, it's Matt. The perfect example of this is it's diminishing return. Okay, so let's write this. Diminishing return. It's the idea that the more you get of something, the less each one is worth. Bill Gates is loaded. His last dollar is essentially, it's at the point where it's meaningless. Like, Bill Gates could lose $1 million right now, and it doesn't matter, because it was just taken off the top, basically. Same thing here, like, your 26,980th chip is basically worthless compared to your first chip, essentially. Hope that makes sense. So, what I think is really important in this hand is this idea of the folding equity is way different. That's why I said, like, what's different about this hand? I know we've kind of discussed this before. Like, I think this is really important. Remember that equation that was expected value, right? Where it's your folding equity and your showdown equity. And there comes a point where the folding equity goes away big time when someone's all in, or when you know they're going to call pre-flop. Like, if we go back to this, when this guy shoves or min raises, you know, let's just pretend he shoves to keep it easy. There is no folding equity in this hand whatsoever, because that guy's not folding. So he's entitled to every single chip in this pot. Remember before we said, like, if you had 50% folding equity, it would be half of that pot. If you have 0% folding equity, that means it's 0% of that pot. So now when you go to here, whenever you see a hand where someone is all in like this, or almost all in, and you know that they're going to call, this is not the same as a normal shove. There's a lot of players on 2+2, for example, who will look down at a shove chart and say, I have 7 true big blinds, I'm on the button, you shove ace-3 suited on the button for 7 big blinds. But that's wrong, because all basic ranges assume that there is folding equity and showdown equity. And here, there's almost zero folding equity. I'm not really sure how much it would be exactly. It's kind of confusing, but it's not a lot. Usually, if this hand was normal, this guy would have, there would be 800 posted, right? Like here, we'll go back to this. 3,300 would be the maximum folding equity on a hand, okay? If they would always fold. So for instance, if for some reason both of these guys were sitting out and their internet was disconnected, probably because they have my internet service, the maximum folding equity would be 3,130. But that's not the case here at all. So this is not a normal shove. Shoving is profitable, but it's not normal. It's not... let me rephrase that. It's normal to shove. I would estimate that 99% of players make this shove, but it's not a normal situation because normal shoves assume that there is folding equity. It assumes that people will fold and you'll get a portion of the pot immediately that's bigger than a couple extra chips. So I think it's really important. Did that make sense? Anybody have any questions? So we kind of talked about why it's important, shove chart assumptions. So now the last thing we want to talk about here is risk versus reward. Why are we risking? Okay, remember that 800, Matt, you said it was somewhere around 800, right? And then it's a percentage of that because it's folding equity. Let's just say the folding equity here is 800, just to keep it easy. Why would you risk 16,000 to get a free 800? And then with the chance of winning a little extra more on the side. Expensive dinner theory. Okay. Bye, Morton. Think about that. So why would you spend 20 times the price of something? That's why if you're going to make a play here, min raise or limp are definitely the best plays, and then you just want to think about which one you like better. Now, of course, if you do min raise, someone said earlier that I think it was Matt, said the big blind does have a chance to reshove on you. That's true. With experience speaking, most of the time people won't because they know their hand is going to show. But it's possible. It's possible. I mean, I definitely would say it's greater than 0% chance. So it will happen sometimes, but the majority of the time, no. But you just want to make sure that you're not spending a lot of money for something. So Dottie said expensive dinner theory. So Mike, I don't think you know about this, and Jerome, I don't think you know about this. It's basically the idea like if you went out to dinner and however much it costs for you to take a girl out to dinner, times that by 20 and think about if you would do that. Because that's basically what this hand is if you shove. You're spending 20 times as much on a dinner date to get the same reward, which is trying to get to know the girl and impress her and all that kind of stuff. Yes, Puyon is correct. Okay. Now, of course, if someone said you have to spend 10 times as much on dinner, but then you get, if the reward was really good, like someone said, hey, I'll give you tickets to the NBA Finals that just happened, I'd be like, oh, okay, like that's worth the reward. This is not worth the reward at all. So Mike, glad it makes sense. The optimal play, something that takes all the risk away from shoving. Because when you shove here, it's just unnecessary risk. Tons of risk with like barely any reward. Optimal play, something that lowers risk, a limp or a min raise, and it's whatever, or a fold actually. A fold would be good too. And you just have to figure out what you like best. Maybe since you wanted to shove before, maybe a min raise feels better to you because you're still raising. But either thing is good. You just have to pick which one you like better, as long as it takes the unnecessary risk away. So, Hero decided to limp here. It looks silly. I'm sure if you showed this to a lot of people on 2+2, you'd probably get LOL'd on a lot. But this is a really, really good play because you conserve risk. Cool. Let's see what happens. So big blind checks. And what's cool about when you do this is a lot of times when someone's all in, as you guys probably know from experience, it's less likely someone's going to bluff. You're probably going to get to see all 5 cards. So there's extra value. You're not just limping to see a flop, you're limping to see everything. So he just checks it down. Look, and that guy survives. Now, I will tell you this for sure. Think about the stage of game you are in, because remember before we said we want to look at stage of game and add that into our equation. I'll tell you this right now. If this was a 45-man where there's an actual pay jump, limping becomes better than the other place. Because you get money immediately if you or the other guy win in this hand. Now, in this particular 180-man, remember Pedro mentioned earlier, and as you guys all know, 9 through 18th, they pay the same. So it's not really worth it as much. Yeah, if this, well, that's true. If this is 10 and you go to 9th place, yeah, then there would be a pay jump. You got it. If this was, for whatever reason, like 11-handed and you went to 10, you're moving towards that extra money, but it's not as important. So my advice then, what I want to add to this is, if there is a pay jump, the bigger the jump, the more likely you should be to limp. And I'll tell you this right now. If there was a meaningful pay jump here, let's just pretend, for instance, this was a $3 rebuy, and it's like a $40, $50 jump. Well, your stacks would probably be deeper, but even if it was these exact stacks, I would limp here with 2-3 offsuit, and I would smile while I do it. And that may look bad, but I don't care, because I'm willing to exchange 1,600 chips for $40. Like, okay, sounds good to me. But some of you might not find that nice. Maybe you guys look at that and go, oh, that's bad, I don't want to do that. And that's fine. If that fits with your personality, that's fine. I think my personality when I played was just get money. If there's money out there to be won, get it. And something that helped me, like lower variance and that kind of stuff. Here, easy example. WSOP, main event satellite, and top 4 get paid. Exactly. Where everyone was getting the same prize, and right now if you got no prize, I would limp 2-3 offsuit here. I would limp it here. I would limp it here. Exactly. I would hope that everybody would limp. That would be amazing. And if I had, I'll tell you, if this was some type of satellite, I would not raise with ace-king. I would limp ace-king. I would limp with aces, because I want to do everything in my power to get that guy out, because that's all that matters. If for some reason, if this was a life-changing amount of money, and of course that would vary from person to person, but for example, if I could get $100,000 for knocking that guy out, I would limp with aces, and I would never raise ever, just because I don't care if it's pocket aces. I'm more concerned with money than I am playing a hand the way that people say I should. Yeah, that's true, and Matt has a good point too. If under the gun jammed, I'd fold aces here too, because getting the prize is more important than preserving your ego. Right. Cool. I think this is a good webinar. Are there any final questions that anybody has, or comments about anything at all? I'm glad the internet only went out once. I was worried. Cool. Feel free to call me Matt, by the way.